He put that in the back of his car, and passengers started to interact and engage with that menu around mealtime, lunchtime, dinner time, things like that. Can I be brought to that restaurant location instead of my actual
Mm,
destination? And so, putting his marketing hat on, we put two and two together. Well, passengers can actually influence in the back of a car when they're going to, known destinations, or at least during known time frames. Like, it's lunchtime, you might be hungry. A restaurant's probably relevant to contextual at that point in time. And so, we developed a platform to really take in trip signals, origination data, destination data, all these other parameters that happen in a trip, and build content and experiences for passengers around that, and then give an opportunity for drivers and fleets and other participants in the ecosystem to share in that revenue that's generated from that.
Welcome to the Rideshare Guy podcast, where you will learn about the rideshare and mobility industry, straight from Harry Campbell, who's got over 5 years experience covering the industry and has talked to thousands of drivers. There's no better place to stay up to date, entertained, and educated. So let's dive in.
Rob Flessner is the CEO and co-founder of Vugo, an AI-powered mobility media platform. Vugo is a pioneer in the development of rideshare advertising and building passenger experiences for fleets and rideshare services. Rob has led Vugo's expansion across North America and Europe and is one of the foremost experts in passenger experience and engagement. Oh, almost made it through your bio perfectly. How are you doing today, Rob?
Doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. And, I think what I might add to that bio or intro is Vugo. Wow, you guys have been around for a while. I think been on the podcast. When did Vugo first start?
Yeah, so we first started officially in 2015, although the idea for it, stems back to even 2014 in the fall,
Hmm.
when myself and James Belfi, over, I think it was holiday break, which we're right around now, got together and kind of hashed through the idea and concepts for what in-vehicle passenger experiences should look like.
Very cool. And I'm sure this must have been a highlight of the company's tenure, but I'm looking at this episode here, Rideshare Guy, episode 28, from Uber driver to co-founder of a rideshare startup called Vugo. And that was with your co-founder, an interview with your co-founder, James, all the way back in November 2016. So kind of cool. I think that was the last time I had you guys on. So I'm guessing a lot has changed. You guys are still around. So I think all positive. I'm excited to dig into it today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what is maybe one of the biggest changes that you've seen, with Vugo, or how have you guys, adapted? Because I think one of the cool things, you were one of the first, or the first rideshare advertising platform over 7, 8, 9 years ago, and you're still around. So obviously you're doing something right.
Yeah, for us, when we first started the company, just to kind of recap a little bit on some of that, my co-founder James Belfi was actually a rideshare driver in
Hmm.
Chicago, moonlighting as a driver at night and working at an advertising agency during the day. And the whole premise for Vugo stems from when he had a friend of his who ran a restaurant give him a
Yeah,
menu to put in the backseat of the car. I'm sure you heard the story from him before.
I
He
have, but it was in 2016, so I need
In
a refresh.
2016, yeah, yeah. So he put that in the back of his car, and passengers started to interact and engage with that menu around mealtime, lunchtime, dinner time, things like that. Can I be brought to that restaurant location instead of my actual
Mm,
destination? And so, putting his marketing hat on, we put two and two together. Well, passengers can actually influence in the back of a car when they're going to, known destinations, or at least during known time frames. Like, it's lunchtime, you might be hungry. A restaurant's probably relevant to contextual at that point in time. And so, we developed a platform to really take in trip signals, origination data, destination data, all these other parameters that happen in a trip, and build content and experiences for passengers around that, and then give an opportunity for drivers and fleets and other participants in the ecosystem to share in that revenue that's generated from that. And so the big change that we've had from 2016, last time we were on the podcast, to today is that we've shifted more from a driver-centric focus, which is still critical to what we're doing because drivers are
hmm
absolutely at the center of the ecosystem, more towards a fleet focus where we work with fleet owners to get their entirety of their fleets on the platform versus necessarily working with drivers on an individualized basis. That helps us as a small business, get scale and things like that, and do some of those things that we otherwise would not be able to do as well. And so from that footprint going forward, we see a lot of our growth opportunity in the future working with mobility service providers, fleets, taxi cab services in some instances, entities that are leasing cars to rideshare drivers. So if you're a rideshare driver that is leasing a car, we would love to work with your fleet owner that you might be leasing from. That'd be a way to get you on the platform. But we work from those aggregation standpoints versus individually with specific drivers.
Got it. What was the impetus for the change from, I guess, marketing and kind of trying to acquire drivers directly? Because I think one of the things that stood out to me with Vugo is, wow, this sounds awesome. It has opportunity to make extra money, right? So as a driver, I'm going to sign up for it. I make a couple extra bucks during the week or the month. So it seems like a good value proposition there. What was the impetus for the shift to these fleets?
Yeah, so there's a couple factors that play for it. One was that we realized that tablets are not very good from a product standpoint. I know there's
Hmm.
other competitors in the space that are using, tablets for it. That's what we first started on as well.
Be like an
Yeah,
iPad
an
style tablet,
iPad
you mean?
basically strapped with some Velcro to the back of the headrest, for
Yeah.
lack of a better phrase. That's great. It works when the driver's actually engaged and participating in that. It doesn't work as well when it becomes unplugged, maybe it's
Hmm.
not mounted correctly. There's a lot of brand safety things that happen that I think devalues the inventory space that would
Yeah.
otherwise be there. And it's not as good of a passenger experience because, I mean, if you're driving on the highway, you hit a big bump, that tablet can go flying in the car and it's not secured properly and be a safety issue for the passenger as well. So
Could be
we've got
stolen by
we've
passengers,
stolen some
Friday,
passengers.
Saturday night, they're
Yeah.
drinking. Oh, let me take this iPad on my way out.
Yep,
Idiots.
exactly. Or even less nefarious, maybe it's since it's protruding out from the back of the seat, maybe it clips your backpack or something on the way out and it just
Hmm.
locked off. That's an annoyance for drivers too, because then they're responsible for making sure it's placed correctly and all those things. So we've gotten away from tablets and moved more towards a fully embedded system. So we actually remove the headrest of the passenger
Oh,
uh,
cool.
seat and actually install a aftermarket display in the vehicle that's fully embedded in the vehicle, so that drivers don't actually have to really do much for it. You just drive like you normally would, and if your fleet is on the platform, you'll receive hopefully some compensation for that. But there's no real work on the driver's side then. So we've taken that effort level out of the equation. The driver turns the vehicle on, screens power up, it connects in as it should from a software standpoint, and starts displaying ads, media, content, passenger experience related things as the vehicle's moving. That when you turn your car off at night, it's part of the car, so you don't have to do anything.
Yeah, that's very cool. I didn't realize that it was actually a removable headrest, and so I think it solves a lot of those challenges there. Where do you sort of see? I think one of the things that always stood out to me with Vugo is that I believe you were the first rideshare advertising platform, and so that I think is a good claim to fame. And a lot of others have come since, right? How do you feel about the competition? Are you sort of like, oh man, they copied our idea, or it's kind of a good thing? It sort of shows that hey, this was a pretty good idea. And where do you think kind of we are? What's the state of like rideshare advertising industry today?
That's a really good question. When we first started the industry, if you will, it didn't exist. I mean, there was
Yeah.
Taxi TV, which was a pretty terrible experience for most people in New York, some in Chicago, some in Las Vegas. But beyond that, I mean, there really wasn't anything in the space. And for us, it's kind of the future of this whole space is really operator centric. So if you think about it from like airlines, right? You've got Spirit, you've got Delta, you've got United. They're all flying the same airplane, but there's different correlating experiences that go with
Yeah.
that. When I hop in a Delta flight, I know I've got that wonderful screen in front of me and I'm going to enjoy the flight. It's just more entertaining, more engaging as a passenger experience. And the same thing is true with in-vehicle space. If you have these things, it adds a lot of value to the passenger from what's actually going on versus if you don't. If you don't have it, it's just, it's the base level experience, if you will. It's flying
Yeah.
Spirit. And so that might not be necessarily the best analogy, but that's kind of how I see a
Yeah.
lot of the space growing over time. Back when we started again in 2016, we were the only player in the space. Now there's a number of players. I'm not going to necessarily list them all off, but there's several of them now in the space, and that's great. The whole industry as large is growing. Out of home advertising, which is the sector of advertising that this plays in,
Hmm.
it's the fastest growing advertising segment, faster than digital because there's a lot of things like ad fraud that happen in digital you don't get
Yeah.
without that. That's going on. So where we see things progressing probably over the next 10 years, it's just more adoption in the space by fleets, automakers, other rideshare services. I mean, Uber is starting to dabble in the space a little bit. Lyft is starting to dabble in the space a little bit. But those are all single platforms. So if you're a driver for Uber, you're going to be stuck on the Uber ecosystem. When you turn your
Yeah.
phone off and go to Lyft, well, the content's going to stop with that. So,
Yeah, that's a good
uh,
point. It's tough. It's tough if you're
yeah,
an Uber driver and you have an ad platform that only works on Uber, and it's in your best
yeah,
interest to do both Uber and Lyft. And now you've got a tablet that doesn't work half the time. So yeah, that's actually I haven't thought about that because I was definitely Uber and Lyft are making a big push into advertising, and I guess if we talk about in-vehicle advertisement, you mentioned that term as the name would imply, right? It's things like tablets that are in the car. I like that you guys were first. You've got a great product now. It seems like like you can definitely be a leader, if not one of the best companies in the in-vehicle advertisement space. What do you think about or I don't know, what would you call it? On top of vehicle? We've seen the billboard ads. Like, how do you
On
think
car,
about,
yeah.
yeah, what do you think about that category versus yours? Is it, better, worse, same, different?
So there's a lot of pros and cons to, exterior ads. I mean, one is that there's more eyeballs on them. Usually when
Yeah.
you're in a car, it's only one passenger, oftentimes maybe a couple passengers, certainly no more than there are seats in the car. But when you're talking about the exterior of the car, you get a lot more, right? And
Yeah.
so you can have a far lower CPM, that's cost per mil, from an
Hmm.
advertiser standpoint on how much it actually costs to have that ad, but the revenue is a little bit greater in some instances just because there's more eyeballs potentially on that display. And so from a pro standpoint, revenue's there. Con standpoint, on the other hand, it's a digital display in an exterior environment. It faces the elements. Uh,
Yeah.
they break often, unfortunately. If you're in a big rainy season of the year in whatever market you're in, that thing's going to get wet, and
Yeah.
you might have some short circuiting of electronics on that thing. So you might be driving around with a black screen, or maybe a panel's out or something like that, and you can't even take your car into a car wash.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, and I know we've heard of, so there's definitely I guess I live in California, so I didn't really think about the rain, the elements, but, like I believe when you go to LAX, like you're not allowed to actually have these billboards on, right? So there's sort of some small issues, like you have to actually turn off these digital displays. And then I guess there's also the kind of car wrapping companies, which I know have been somewhat, there's a few of those. And I guess like you said, right, these are higher CPM or lower CPM, so more eyeballs on these ads, but obviously less targeted. So I imagine maybe the types of advertisers would gravitate to that would be, hey, new huge Marvel movie coming out. They want to get the word out. Maybe that's kind of the better use case for like a really high intent, hey, we know where we're dropping this passenger off and let's show them a specific type of ad, or we know their history or whatever it might be in the car.
right, absolutely. So I mean, again, if you're doing a vinyl wrap in particular, great medium, it works really
Yeah.
well, really high visibility, but you're gonna lose some of that targeting capability that you'd otherwise have with a one-on-one conversation with a passenger.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm a big fan of a lot of these car wrapping companies. And,
Yep.
I wrapped my car for my Curbivore conference. And, we did a cool wrap with the Curbivore branding. And then afterwards, I went and, because I also wanted to test what it was like for these drivers who are getting their cars wrapped in advertising. And I just happened to advertise my own thing. But, once I got it off, I mean, there was a little bit of sticky residue. I got a detail. It didn't quite come off. I don't know if it was, it wasn't a huge deal. You couldn't see it, but like if you felt the car, you could definitely feel it. And it was we got a couple details and it still like didn't I think now it's completely off. But I mean, with those physical products, there's just a lot more, like you said, the elements, or there's issues like, oh, now you got to get it unwrapped. And so it does seem like, I think there's a very valid use case, but it seems like a lot more moving parts, and a lot more operations and
Yep.
things that can go wrong, basically.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. So I think that's a helpful kind of download on the state of the industry. Anything else you want to say about, I mean, I guess the fact that Uber and Lyft are doing it, does that say something like, hey, this is a pretty good idea? Or, hey, these guys are doing it now and
Yep.
there must be some real money here.
Yeah, we have a pretty, long history with Uber and Lyft on the space. Going back to when we first started the company, it's
Hmm.
it's it's kind of fun to watch the transition over time with them, because back when we first started the business, there was always a threat of like, well, does Uber let you do this, or does Lyft let
Yeah.
you do this? Am I a driver? Am I going to be deactivated if I use a platform? All of those things. Just the general tonality was much different than
Hmm.
from those groups. Like there was this perception that it's going to destroy the passenger experience. It's going to be
Yeah.
bad for drivers. It's going to, all of these bad things are going to happen. Well, it turns out, now if you look at their media pages on their websites, I mean, it's exact opposite messaging. It's like, this is amazing. It
Yeah.
drives passenger engagement. Passengers love it. There's content. There's revenue opportunity for drivers. So they've completely done a 180 over the past, 8 years or so on that type of tonality about the whole space. And I think it's largely in part because there is money to be made here, and there is a lot of value for passengers to be delivered. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hope I don't butcher this, but I feel like I did a podcast a few months ago and I want to say Dara talked about, it was hundreds of millions that they were making in advertising income. And I did a podcast on Instacart's, IPO with Emil Michael. And we talked about, I mean, they're basically a break-even business and then they make money from advertising. So definitely, not rocket science that a lot of these companies are turning to advertising to kind of increase that marginal revenue. So cool opportunity. So you mentioned something earlier, this focus on fleets. So let's talk a little bit about the, sort of why it's so valuable for fleet owners. And maybe we could start with a basic definition. What is a fleet owner in your mind?
yeah, so a fleet owner is there's several verticals within a fleet, type of thing. I mean, the original type of fleet would be like a taxi cab fleet, like just
Okay.
the most crude definition of it. But then there's other types of fleet owners, which would be like leasing entities that are leasing out vehicles to rideshare drivers for whatever the monthly lease is, or
Yeah.
weekly, even in some instances where the driver is going to pick up their own, I'm sorry, the fleet vehicle and drive on
Yeah.
behalf of that. Those are probably the two most common. I mean, there's some other verticals. There's municipal fleets. There's like non-emergency medical transportation fleets. There's a few other areas as well. Those are all great because they offer aggregation points for us to install
Yeah.
screens in. And we're able to do things like integrate with their dispatch provider, all of these things like that, where we can then use that data on the targeting aspect for building passenger experiences and building those value propositions that we would otherwise want to see in the car. So
Very cool. So yeah, I
yeah.
think taxis are a good one because, like you said, there's been some version of taxi advertising in the past. And I think a lot of people have, pointed out, oh, it's crummy or it doesn't work too well. So you can obviously kind of iterate and improve upon that. And the leasing entities, I think, are interesting and one I know a lot about, right? I mean, so it's basically if you're driving for Uber and Lyft, most people, bring their own car onto the platform. But if you don't have your car, you can go to an Avis, you can go to a Hertz, you can get a Model 3 from Hertz, for example, and rent that for 400 bucks a week. So it's not cheap, but you get unlimited mileage and you get to drive. And then there's also a host of, fleet owners that have 200 cars. We've had Seamus from Rideshare Cars in Houston and Dallas. They've got a couple hundred cars that they're renting to Uber and Lyft drivers for a few $100 a week. And they've got a bunch of EVs now. So talk a little bit about those folks that are, we'll call them maybe rideshare fleets that are renting to Uber and Lyft drivers. What's the benefit to them by partnering with you guys?
Yeah, so there's really two benefits. One is the ad revenue that can be generated from these screens can help offset existing costs that the fleet might be incurring. Insurance is a big one. Just general maintenance of the vehicle is a big one. The ad revenue
Yeah.
can actually help offset or completely eliminate that in some instances.
Well, I think that's actually a really good point because I think what a lot of these fleet owners they realize it, right? But I mean, like I said, right? I mean, it's 300 bucks, 400
Mhm.
bucks to rent a car per week. And now the driver it's flexible, it's week to week and you get unlimited mileage and all you're responsible for as a driver is that weekly fee plus gas or charging. But I mean, that's a lot of money, right? So anything you can do to offset 50 or 100 bucks a week does make an impact. And now as a driver, I'm going to pick one car over the other, right? So I just wanted to kind of highlight that like, man, these weekly rentals are expensive. So I really do think that, you want drivers making a lot, trying to lower their expenses, offset some of that weekly rental fee.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, when you partner with these fleets, you said so the main thing would, I guess, be potential ad revenue, right? How much can they make, for example? I'm sure it varies and a lot, but what's sort of a
Yeah.
ballpark or average, or what do you tell a fleet owner, if they're asking you,
Yeah, I mean,
frankly?
it varies a ton. There's a lot of factors that go into it. I mean, one is
Hmm.
like how active is the fleet with their vehicles. If the
Yeah.
car is only on the road a few hours a week, it's going to be a lot less than if you're on the road hundreds
Yeah.
of hours a week, for example.
Well,
So,
the nice thing is when when you have to pay 300 bucks a week, you got to work at least 30, 40 hours a week as a
right,
driver
exactly.
to pay the
Exactly.
car. So it's going to be active,
Exactly.
right? Or it should be
On the extreme low end, it's probably, $50, $60. On the extreme high end, it's, a few $100s. So a lot of
per
that
week
goes
or per month.
it's per month for that.
Okay.
So, 50, $60 per week would probably be pretty consistent with what we would see. There are some examples in there that kind of break that mode.
Yeah.
New York City at large is a huge out of home advertising market. Same thing with Miami. There's a few other cities too. I mean,
Hmm.
those are the areas that like if you're in that market, like you can make a lot of money doing this. But if you're in like Ann Arbor, Michigan or Duluth, Minnesota, or just a much smaller market where it's, maybe 50 or 60,000 people in your community, you're going to be on the lower spectrum of that just because there's
Why
less
is it
advertising.
such higher payouts in New York City and Miami?
It's a top advertising market at
Got
large.
it. So advertisers are more willing to
Advertisers,
spend money there. You can find more advertisers to then
yep.
pay these fleet owners.
And that's the bigger item is the number of advertisers willing to spend money there versus the actual ad rate. The rates are actually pretty consistent from market to market.
Mm,
They fluctuate a little bit, but it might be like a $10 or $15 CPM in smaller
yeah,
market, maybe $15 to $20 CPM in a higher market. So it's not that much of a difference, but the bigger issue is like how many advertisers you can actually find in those markets.
got it. Are there specific regions where you guys are targeting or had the most success with fleet owners?
The most success in the country for fleet owners right now, in my opinion, are greater New York City area and
Hmm.
then anything in southern Florida.
Mm, okay.
Those two areas are like really great for all of this. But any of your top 15, DMAs at large are
Bigger
really,
cities.
yep, yep.
Yeah. And then I think so we talked about the first, sort of benefit to fleet owners. Was there a second one? I guess there's the ad revenue piece. And then is there a second benefit or any other ancillary benefits?
Yeah, so there's a lot of other factors that we include in it. We actually call it the Vugo Passenger Companion. That's what we
Mm,
call the screen. And so there's a lot of other workflows we can drive on that. So we can help with billing in some instances, so we can collect payment on the
mm.
screens. We can do like non-emergency medical transportation, signature collection, which is a federal mandate. We do in-vehicle messaging as well. So we give fleets up to 10% of the inventory to put their own messaging on
Oh,
that.
cool.
In some instances, that's valuable. Other instances, it's not. It really kind of depends on the use case and the market that the fleet is in. We get more value with like municipal fleets. So like if you want to have like community messaging, if you're a municipal fleet versus like just pure ad revenue.
Yeah.
So there's some other benefits to it.
Nice. Yeah, no, I like those. And, I mean, it's kind of like Uber is able to take advantage, right? They've got Uber One product, you're taking a ride with Uber, for example, and they're like, hey, have you heard about our Uber One subscription package? Like you should sign up. So, I think they would obviously love to be able to target that and for no cost. So there's definitely some valuable,
Absolutely.
messaging or loyalty or subscription programs that you can kind of get people to sign up with, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, very cool. So, one thing you mentioned that I guess it made me think of was a possible use case in the AV space, right? Because, having these, I mean, I guess every AV is going to have a tablet. Are there categories like AV or others that you're looking to sort of, in the future where you see a lot of opportunity on the fleet side?
Yeah, everything is going to move towards autonomous at some point. It's just
Hmm.
writing's on the wall. It's not going to be for a while. It's going to be some distant future still, just based on how things have gone in the press recently with like Cruise and some of these other groups with running into issues in San Francisco and
Yeah.
things like that. But ultimately, this is about building the passenger economy. And so when you're no longer driving and you're a passenger in a car, either in a rideshare vehicle, a taxi cab, an AV, whatever it might be, what are you going to be doing? And so
Yeah.
you probably be consuming media, content, interacting with something. There's money to be made there with that interaction and with that engagement. And so building workflows that can help facilitate those types of engagements make total sense. In addition, on the AV side in particular, going back to the San Francisco examples of some of the problems they've been having there, I also see the in-vehicle experience also as an opportunity for passenger safety to bring
Mm,
that to the forefront where, if there is an issue with the vehicle, how are you going to communicate that issue? It's got to be
yeah.
within some kind of a screen or some kind of a user engagement. Because what if your phone is in your, backpack that's in the trunk of the car? It's tough to really get to that at that point. So there's a lot of things like that can be built out with a passenger experience.
Yeah, very cool. Well, and I think maybe a good place to end on is, I guess, how's it going out there in the real world? I think you mentioned that you've got partnerships in North America, I think Europe too. You've announced some stuff. So maybe give us a little insight into, maybe if you want to highlight one or two companies you're working with on the fleet side right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So our big partnership that we have right now that we are really expanding on is with Renault out in
Hmm.
Europe. They work with a lot of different fleets. They have a leasing program with rideshare drivers as well, and they work with several dispatch providers out there. And so we're going to have a pretty big expansion happening in Europe over the next, I would say 12 to 24 months. We're going to be onboarding probably, thousands of vehicles every
Yeah.
single month, hopefully there next year. So it's going to be quite a bit of expansion that we're doing there. In North America, we have a lot of new initiatives coming with our Vugo Passenger Companion device that we are pushing up fleets. And so we're expecting to see some cool new use cases emerge in the next couple of months on that as well. So both of those, we're really excited about, and keep an eye on the news because you'll hopefully see something there.
Very cool. Yeah, no, that sounds exciting. What do you think is kind of the main, when you've been discussing with Renault or some of these other partners, what's their main reason for signing up with Vugo and kind of wanting to go this route?
It's really twofold. One is money. It's,
Yeah.
ad revenue is great, and we're also independent. We're not Uber, we're not Lyft, we're not, Bolt. If
Yeah.
you're one of the other services, we're purely independent, meaning we can work with virtually any fleet, regardless if it's a dispatch, trip, or if it's through Uber or one of the other systems that's out there. So you can make money in all of your rides. And
Yeah.
the other one is just that it's a superior product offering with the way that we're doing it with the embedded screen versus a tablet. Tablets, again, are great, but they're not the end goal of what people should be really going for.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I think that's a good note to end on. Help fleets make more money, leverage across multiple rideshare platforms, and it's a better product. So I'm excited. I think you sent me a picture of one. So I've seen it, a picture of the new product, but I'm looking forward to seeing it in real life. So hopefully we'll be able to make that happen soon.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Cool. Well, if folks want to learn more about you or Vugo, where can they go? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, you can go to our website. It's www.govugo.com, govugo.com.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Rob.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Harry.
Thanks for watching today's episode of the Rideshare Guy podcast. For more information on today's guest, please check the description. Now, you don't want to miss this interview of the Rideshare Guy podcast, so click here and also make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any future ones. See you next time.